Some of the members participated in decorating the window at Allman's department store to promote not only Tippecanoe athletics, but the school in general this fall. Some of the members also attended a summer clinic at Troy. They helped decorate the school. Their responsibility was senior hall with spirit signs every week in the locker room. And sort of an inside joke between us, it was this squad who sold maybe hundreds or thousands or millions maybe of those never-ending red and white pom-poms. Really appreciate their efforts there. They helped cheer for homecoming, and they participated in the pep assembly, and they're not done yet because we have a dance tomorrow night with the varsity tee, and they're working on that. 3 of the members of this squad were freshmen, young ladies new to our program and new to our school. What they brought with them was a great many smiles and a lot of enthusiasm and zeal. And tonight they received their plaque and their reserve tee for their efforts this year. Kim Adkins, first of all. Tracy Consani. And Jessica Kemp. The sophomore members of this squad have all been cheerleaders for our program before, and their experience provided the leadership that we needed. Receiving second-year awards are Tricia Fields, Jana Jonovich, and Amy Rich, who had basketball practice tonight and can't be with us, also will receive her award. She served as captain. Will you join with me in congratulating these girls on their efforts? And now I'd like the varsity football cheerleaders and the mascot to come forward, please. These are the young ladies who provide lots of color and excitement to the traditional fall evening in Tippecanoe City down at the football field at the park. For me, of all the squads that I've worked with over the years, I thought they were perhaps the most enjoyable group to work with. All the young ladies you see up here are affable, easy to get along with, cooperative, responsible for all their responsibilities and duties that they have. Not only to me, but they practice those same good qualities on one another. They were supportive of their team. They worked very hard on spirit signs and those great big bulletin boards along the main hallway in the new part of the building. They worked hard on pep assemblies and making their performances as nice as they could be. And speaking personally and for the school, I thought that these young ladies demonstrated for the community and for the visiting teams what we think of as good spirit and sportsmanship. And always there are younger eyes on them, and they provide the correct example for those younger yet-to-be cheerleaders for Tippecanoe. Again, every year I have an overriding remembrance of each of the squads, and I guess I'd have to sum this one up as fun. They had fun cheering. They had fun interacting with the crowd. Most of you probably noticed that. They had fun with one another, both at practice and at the games, and they shared all that fun with me. So to start the awards, I'd like to call forth our mascot, Jackie Gostomski. Jackie was a volunteer. She was the one who passed out all the smiles and handshakes to the big big folks and the little folks at the games and help the cheerleaders a lot. She's going to continue to support us in the capacity of the mascot during basketball. Now, the junior members of this squad will receive their varsity tee this year, a notable achievement. And to receive that tonight, our first, Lee Dietrich. Next, Tracy Gagne. Nicole Rockhill, who served as captain of this group. Angie Schinkel. And Amy Stubb. And now that sort of moment that is bittersweet, to recognize the seniors and thank them for their contributions to our program and the many memorable times over the years. I think the tone of any group is set by its senior members, and these seniors for this year set certainly a positive tone, a lighthearted tone, as well as providing the leadership and example setting that we expect. The first senior I'd like to recognize is new as a cheerleader this year, but she's not new to Tippecanoe activities. She's done a number of things over the years. She brought a lot of poise to our program. She exercised excellent responsibility, which is kind of a cornerstone. We do a lot of things behind the scenes, and we expect it done at the right time. She relates well to everyone, the crowd, and I'm proud to present Michelle Brown her varsity tee. Our next senior is also new as a cheerleader, but once again not new to appearing before the crowds at the football games. She brought a lot of accomplished grace to the cheerleading squad, also very responsible in exercising the things that we have to do behind the scenes. A lot of pretty smiles and a lot of enthusiasm from Tricia Sizemore receiving her varsity tee. And the last senior receives her second year varsity award. Her contributions over the 2 years that she's been a cheerleader are very great. The ones that I think of most are enthusiasm that she brings, a ready smile, joy, a lot of brightness, and a great deal of help to me. Leslie Lebrecq. And so salute our varsity football cheerleaders, and especially the seniors, for the good job they did this year.
We have some things we'd like to say. I think Mrs. Minky pretty much covered all of our thank yous, but we have a couple that we'd like to thank. First of all, we'd like to thank Schmeals for all the donations that they gave us. They really helped out a lot, because getting money in things is always hard, as everyone I'm sure knows. And we'd like to thank my dad, Mr. Lebrecq, for all his help in our shoes and things that he got us. And we'd like to thank the football players for their very exciting year. They've been a really great team to cheer for, and we've loved every minute with them. Thanks.
There's one person we'd like to give a special thanks to that put up with all of our problems and really stood by us and helped support us and made the squad what it is, Mrs. Minky.
Thank you very much.
And the varsity cheerleaders are presenting the karaoke fund with $30.
This is something we do every year, and I really appreciate it. Especially thank you on behalf of Ted and Barbara Oak.
And we have a few other gifts we'd like to pass out. Thank you.
In case there's any freshman parents out here tonight for the first time, and I know there is, each year as a freshman and also on your first varsity or reserve award, the Booster Club gives a plaque, and also it's a remembrance that on each award that is received, it gives you something that hopefully from years and years from now that you'll remember, and something that you can always cherish. I know it's tough, Tim, to follow the cheerleaders, but you're up next, Tim Hopkins.
That is a tough group to follow, and somewhere along the line, Mr. LeBrecq, I missed that we can come down and get shoes, but I'll be down tomorrow, okay? Now that I know that's out there, I must have forgot to read my bulletin that week. We have a number of awards to give tonight, and a number of people to honor, and people who are certainly deserving of those honors. And I know that some of you are into your second banquet this week already. Mr. Pond informed me that was okay with him. He enjoyed the cooking, but we want to get on with the awards. As Mrs. Minky did, there are a number of people that I need to thank also. And I know that sometimes you come to a number of banquets and it gets somewhat redundant, some of the things that you hear, but you have to understand that we don't get an opportunity very often to stand up in public and talk to those people and thank those people who need to be thanked. And so take that opportunity whenever we get the chance to. First of all, the parents who are here, like Mrs. Minky said, we appreciate the time that you give to your young men and your young women. They will appreciate that greatly later in life. The wives. The wives go through an awful lot. And I'm kind of a tough head coach, and I expect the guys to give a lot of time, and they have to ask of that time from their wives, and their wives give graciously, and I certainly thank everything that they do for us. Cheerleaders, thank you for everything that you've done for us this year. We appreciate your help. A few special people, George Hackbart. George, would you stand up? He doesn't like to stand up, but thank you. George takes an unbelievable amount of pictures throughout the course of the season, and I think for no other reason except that he loves to do it. And we certainly appreciate the help that he gives us. The Booster Club and everything that they do for us is certainly appreciated. Mr. Bill Cheney. Mr. Cheney, would you please stand up? Mr. Cheney is kind of one of those guys behind the scenes. Not a whole lot of people even know that he's around. He spends hours and hours and hours on Friday night and Saturday. He is our statistician. He keeps all of our official statistics, and the amount of work that he puts into it is just unbelievable. He gives us every Sunday afternoon when we meet. He gives us a complete breakdown of everything from rushing yardage through to on what play, what guy did what at what yard line. It's just unbelievable, and we appreciate that help. I'd like to thank Dale Molinex and the chain crew for the work that they did this year, Troy Daily News and their staff, the Tipp Herald and their staff. As Mrs. Minky mentioned, our administrative staff here at school is a staff that's very helpful, and we certainly owe them our appreciation as coaches. My eyes are just getting opened up to this world of head coaching, and it's amazing. I'm so glad that I started out in a school system where I've got administrators who are helpful, who will sit down with you, who will talk to you, and will help you through the season. It's not uncommon for me to get a note from Mr. Pond throughout the course of the season with words of encouragement. My building administrators continually have their doors open and will talk to me, and that's very helpful. My staff is a group that I owe a great deal of thanks to. They work extremely hard. I'm a demanding guy. At times I can be a very unorganized guy, and they always seem to be there to pick up the pieces and to keep things going. I have a great deal of respect for all of them, and I appreciate their help. And then before we get into the awards, I guess the last group of people that I want to thank are the players. They keep my life interesting, that's for sure. And we're going to give them their awards now, and I think the first guy that's going to come up is Mr. Taylor and help me pass out the awards to those people who are our defensive linebackers.
Before presenting any awards, I would also like to thank the players this year. You know, I think it's very easy in this day and age for a young man to just sit at home and, drink pop and watch TV and eat some potato chips, and rather than being out on the hot practice field in the middle of August. And I think that all of these young men, really deserve my thanks from the standpoint of coaching them. That they didn't take the easy way out. They're doing something, and I really feel that their participation in this great game is going to pay them great dividends long after their playing days are over. So I really appreciate the fact that they've got what I call courage to come out and play the game. I'm going to start out by presenting the awards to the freshmen, and these young men played linebacker. The first one is, and I'd like for them to come up as I call their name, and if you would, we'll hold the applause until they're all up here. First one is Chris Whitaker. He's a freshman. He's earning his reserve award for the first time. He played reserve linebacker. He was also an offensive lineman on the reserve team. Just stay up here, Chris. Chris is one of those young men that always did a good job on the scout team for us, both offensively and defensively. And I think Chris is a good example of the fine group of young freshmen that we had this year. For those of us that served our apprenticeship on the reserve level at one time, we know that it's, I think, a lot more difficult to come out to practice every day when you're a reserve player than if you're a Friday night star. And Chris did a good job for us all year. Told him before, with a lot of hard work, I think he can have a good year next year. Next, we have Tony Gostomski. Tony's also one of our freshman linebackers, earning his first reserve award. Tony very unselfishly moved his offensive position this year to offensive center for the good of the team, because that's where we needed somebody at that time. Tony was our starting reserve linebacker. He also called all of our defensive signals in the reserve games. Tony has good football knowledge. He does a good job of getting to the ball. And I think if Tony has a good winter in the weight room and a good spring in the weight room, I think he can step in and really do a good job for us next year. Spencer Brown. Spencer Brown is a sophomore. Stepped in this year, is earning his first football letter. Spencer got injured late in the season. He started for Jeff Mormon in the Versailles game when Jeff was hurt. Played the entire game injured. Spencer is a very hard hitter. As a matter of fact, for his size, I think he sometimes hits himself into injury because he hits so hard. He always plays hard. He has a tremendous nose for the football. And I'm really expecting Spencer to be able to step in next year and do a real good job defensively for us. Those are our underclassmen. We have three upperclassmen that played linebacker for us this year. The first one is senior Tim Papp. Tim's earning his second football letter. Tim was a linebacker, and Tim started at fullback this year. And he was the fourth rusher on the team by 1 yard, or he'd have been third, with 205 yards. He had a 5.3 rushing average. I told Tim before the Milton game, I talked to linebackers, and I had the seniors stay. And Tim said, "You want me to stay too?" And I told him, I said, "Yeah, Tim, I want you to stay because I think of you as a linebacker first that just happens to be the starting fullback." And that's the way I've always felt. And Tim, when he was called upon to play linebacker, did a good job for us filling in for people that were injured. Early in Tim's career, he had a lot of injuries himself, and, there was doubt from year to year whether Tim would even be with us. He had a very serious knee injury, and he's bounced back from that through sheer determination and won that starting fullback job. He told Coach Hopkins earlier in the year that he was going to be the starting fullback. And, just through hard work, he made it happen. And I think he improved week to week, particularly blocking, which, as Coach Hopkins well knows and has said many times, that's the job of the fullback. But I think if you were at the Milton game, you saw a tremendous job by Tim Papp blocking. So that was a tremendous improvement all year long. Jeff Mormon is our other senior linebacker. He's earning his third varsity football letter. Jeff finished the season second in tackles with a total of 84, and that was with missing the Versailles game. Jeff, I feel, was our big hit linebacker. He was our big hit defensive player, and I think if you could take a poll of all our opponents and ask them who hit the hardest, I think they'd say Jeff Mormon did. And, really appreciate the job that Jeff has done, and Jeff is just one of those people that likes contact. The last senior linebacker, one of our captains, also earning his third varsity football award, Carl Pera. Carl led the team in tackles with 106. He had 1 interception and recovered 3 fumbles. Carl called all of our defensive signals. He was also named the first team all-conference for the second year. Carl, again, is very unselfish. At the beginning of the year, we talked to Carl, and we knew that we had to move him from a defensive back into the linebacker position. And being realistic about it, his skills are probably better as a defensive back. And if he's going to go on and play in college, or at the time we figured even make all-conference, he probably had a better chance at defensive back. But because of personnel, we needed him to play linebacker, and he unselfishly did that. Carl wasn't a real flashy linebacker. He probably didn't hit as hard as Jeff Mormon, but he was a steady linebacker. You'd sit there and watch the game films on Sunday, and every play, Carl, was just doing a good, solid, steady job. These are our linebackers. It has been my pleasure to coach them this year, and I thank you, men. Let's get ready for next year.
I should probably take a second to introduce these people, too. Coach Taylor, I just kind of called him up here, but Coach works with our defensive linebackers and our offensive receivers. He's our defensive coordinator, and he is a guy who puts in a lot of time, is very dedicated to the sport, and I think you can tell by listening to him talk, he loves the game. Coach Schischler, if you'll come up now and help us with some of the defensive lineman awards. Next, we're going to give the awards to our front 5 players, and Coach Schischler and I will be doing that. One coach isn't here tonight. That's Coach Hines. He's a classic, and it's a shame he couldn't be here, but Coach Hines is involved in a class where there's 2 classes to go, and next week he's going to be in parent-teacher conferences, and so he had to go take his final exam tonight. So you keep your fingers crossed for him. I worry about him. Coach Schischler, go ahead.
Before I present any awards, I'd like to take this time to extend my appreciation to school board and Mr. Pond, Mr. Burke, and Mr. Hill, and especially Tim, Coach Hopkins, for letting me have the opportunity of being part of the program this year. I really enjoyed it. We had a good season, and I just want to thank you very much. This time, we'll start with, we'll present the awards to the reserves, and as you come up, we'll present the awards to you. Mike Bayman. Mike played defensive end for us. He did a nice job for us on reserves. Did an outstanding job. Dave Dirth. Dave played offensive and defensive tackle. He did a fine job for us. He started out slow during the season, but he came on strong towards the end. He did a real fine job for us. Danny Baltzer. Danny was a first-year player. He's a sophomore this year. Did a real fine job for us. He played a little bit of nose guard reserves, but basically played guard. Did a fine job for us on offense. Jerry Louderback. Jerry played nose guard for us on reserves. Did an outstanding job. If you want to see anybody in the backfield all the time, you'd see Jerry back here. You knew he was tough. He did a real fine job for us. Joe Carner. Joe played offensive and defensive tackles. Did a real fine job. Mark Mangin. Mark played defensive end for us, played some split end and tight end. He kind of moved around on the offense. Mark did a real nice job. Rob Elliott. Okay. Rob just moved in this year. He got started slow. He was late to summer camp and everything, but Rob really came on towards the end, played a real fine job for us at defensive end. Tony Hubbard. Tony is a first-year player. He's a sophomore. And Tony, I'll tell you, he really worked hard. He's dedicated. He worked hard, and he really improved towards the end. Tony had a lot of problems with his weight and stuff. I can contest to that because I had a lot of problems when I played. So he really worked hard, and he really came on strong. Okay, Vaughn Atkinson. Vaughn here. Okay. And Ricky Brownlee. Ricky, towards the end, he came on. He played on the kickoff on varsity and did a real fine job for us. He did a lot of good hard hitting. And on reserves, he played defensive end and tight end. He did a real nice job, worked hard, and came on strong. We're expecting a lot of things out of him next year. And these are our reserve front five. And congratulate them on the fine job they did this year. Thank you, guys.
The third-year guys. Okay, I'm going to go ahead with front five players also, and the front five players that I'm going to give you are upperclassmen who are receiving some level of a varsity award, whether it be a first, second, or third year time that they have lettered for us. Defensively and offensively, it's a group of young men who played very hard for us this year. Defensively especially, they're a group who you're going to find down there in the trenches. I got kind of a special spot in my heart for those people. They play in the mud and they play in the middle, and you don't always get to see them make the interception. You don't always get to see them make the big play, but you know they're there. And when they're not there, you're in trouble. And that's important because we talk to them every week about the fact that a great deal of how the outcome of the game goes is going to be dependent upon them. First of all, a young man who is a defensive middle guard but made his name this year on the offensive side of the ball, receiving his first varsity letter, is Chris Burke. Chris, as you'll look at him, is not a very big kid in stature. I worried when Coach Schischler got mad at him. I was afraid I might not be able to find him anymore, but Chris is a kid who has worked very hard. He comes to all the summer workouts. He runs hard. He lifts hard. He does the kind of things that he needs to do. The greatest thing about Chris as a football player is that he's come to that realization that he's not going to be able to play the game the way big physical people play the game. And so he's made up by that through learning his technique, learning what it is he has to do to accommodate for his size. And as a result of that, he worked himself into the starting lineup as a sophomore this year. And we just were a team that didn't have a whole lot of sophomores in the lineup anywhere. And so I give him a great deal of credit for ending up in the starting lineup this year. I also put a lot of responsibility on Chris. He has 2 years where he's going to have to be a leader for us. Secondly, is a young man who is earning his first varsity letter, and that is Scott Gardner. Scott's kind of a team favorite, and these guys are biting their tongue a little bit right now not to call out at him and heckle him a little bit, but Scott's one of those kids that I'm going to look forward to having him next year because I've watched him now from the time he was a freshman all the way through. He has matured Physically, he's matured. Socially, he's matured. He's matured in the classroom. He's a pleasure to be with because he's just come a long way. And a little guy who we weren't real sure about as a freshman, and now all of a sudden we can put him on the defensive line. We feel comfortable with him out there. And he's one of those kids that's going to be a senior next year, and we're going to be relying on. And that doesn't even scare me. Next is Billy Burke. Billy's a ball player who came into the season, and we had high expectations for him. The first month of the season turned out to be frustrating for Billy. He couldn't seem to get it all to come together for him. He had the physical tools. He knew what he was supposed to do. It was getting them to match up. And we knew that with time it would come. Eventually, due to injuries, Billy got his chance to play, and slowly but surely he began to develop and he began to mature into that kind of player that we thought he could be when the season started. We have real high hopes for Billy in the future. If he's willing to put in the time and work hard, he has a good football career ahead of him. Next is Sean Dries. Sean is earning his second varsity letter. Sean also is one of those young men who came out this year, and we knew that we had to rely on Sean. We knew that he was a kid who was going to have to play for us if we were going to be successful. He was put into the offensive tackle position, and I don't say this to degrade Sean, but at the time we put him in, I'm not really sure he was ready to be a starting offensive tackle. But he took on the responsibility, he continued to work hard, and at the end of the year, I am sure he was ready to be a starting offensive tackle, and that's what it's about, developing as a player and getting better every game. Next young man receiving his second varsity letter is Matt Richards. Matt is another one of those few underclassmen who had the opportunity to be in a lineup this year. This is Matt's second varsity letter. He's kind of earned a spot for himself on our offensive line, and we bounced him this year from offensive guard to offensive center. That's not an easy move with 160-pound nose guards who go both ways across from you. It's a tough block, tougher than a lot of people realize. Matt's a steady part of our offensive line. He anchors. We know he's going to be there week in and week out. This year, I think the thing that gratified me the most about Matt's play was that we finally turned him into the defensive player that we felt he had the ability to be. That's where he kind of hung his hat. At the end of the year, he was a big hit person for us on defense. I can take you into the video room right now and show you some hits that he had throughout the course of the year that really stunned some running backs. We're going to be counting on Matt to anchor our offensive and defensive line next year also. Next young man's kind of a hard luck story, and that's John Bodendistel. And yet at the same time I say that, he's the farthest thing from a hard luck story. John, I know, was disappointed at the end of the year this year. He was injured, and he missed the last 4 games of the season with a neck injury. He was very disappointed about that, and yet at the same time, although John thought he was a hard luck story and felt awful bad about it, I looked at him and I told him at that point he had an awful lot to be thankful for. He's a young man who came out as a freshman, stayed out of the program as a sophomore, came back as a junior, and he had set out a year and had to kind of wait in the wings. He had to reprove himself. And I know that deep down inside, John wanted to prove that he was a varsity football player. And he got 6 games this year to prove that, did an outstanding job for us at defensive end, was always making big plays for us. We missed him at the end of the season, and if you haven't heard, the news is good, and he will wrestle this year, and so we're very happy about that. Next young man's Bud Heckman. Bud's kind of one of those multi-dimensional people, and he said, "Coach, you got to get me out by 8 o'clock because I got to go to play practice." And I think that's great that the guy's involved in those kind of things, and I'm glad that I got to him before 8 o'clock. Bud is one of those people who has worked extremely hard during the off season. He's an awful good football player. He had a tough time of it because he continued to find himself in positions where he was behind people who were maybe just a step better than him, and he didn't give up. He continued to work. He came to me with 2 weeks to go in the season and wanted to make a position change, hoping that he'd get him more playing time. He's always looking for a way to get on the field. He played on all our special teams. He was a backup defensive end for us. He was a backup receiver for us, and a very steady ball player throughout the course of the year and throughout his career, and we appreciate his hard work. Next is Billy Drury. Bill's receiving his third varsity letter. Yeah, guy's been around for ages. He's receiving his third varsity letter. Billy is somebody I think for a guy like Chris Burke to look up to. Bill's a guy who also has fought physical stature throughout the course of his career, but overcame that. Bill did it, and I think you can tell by looking at him in the weight room. He made up for that lack of height and lack of weight that he had. The guy's incredible doing push-ups. The one thing you don't want to do if you want to give Bill a penalty and make him work extras, don't make him do push-ups. He'll laugh at you all night. Billy had a great season for us at offensive guard. He played a lot of offensive guard last year. We did our best this year to keep him off the offensive side of the ball so that we could rest him and play him just on defense, and it paid its dividends. He played middle guard for us. Billy's kind of one of those guys like Coach Taylor was talking about with Carl. He doesn't make the big play, and he's not always out there where you can see him, but he's just solid. He's steady. He's always there, and we know that he's going to anchor the middle of that defensive line when we go into each and every Friday night. By the way, Billy had four interceptions. If he did, I'd be worried. He had 4 fumble recoveries for us this year, and that's an awful high number of fumble recoveries, and I think what it proves is how often he was around the football. Next is John Magnus. I'm bringing John up with the front 5. We had hopes of him being a wide receiver. If you saw the ball that he picked off out of the air over at Covington, he just couldn't get into the end zone, and with that show of speed, we decided we'd leave him where he was at on the offensive line. John's one of those guys that gives you an awful lot of gratification also as a coach, because you get the opportunity to see him come in as a freshman. He reminded you a lot of like a baby Huey type. He came in and he was one of those guys where the coaches are standing over there saying, "No way." You know, he won't make it 4 years. We hope he makes it through the week. And the guy just kept running. He's one of the most dedicated athletes I've ever seen. He too is one of those people that I think truly loves the game of football. He just enjoys playing, and he wants to be out there and he wants to be involved in things. Over the years, he continued to develop more and more and more. As a junior, he started 10 games for us at offensive tackle. As a senior, he started 10 games for us at offensive tackle. He was a leader for us. He was on the field. He was working hard. We averaged about 4.5 yards a carry on offense this year. A great deal of that is because we were going over the left side where John Magnus and Jeff Mormon were located. He did an outstanding job for us. Next front 5 member is Kevin Nader. Kevin, I have a chance to give you some of his offensive statistics a little bit later, and I want to save those for when we bring him up and talk about that. You know, I think Kevin, again, is one of those people who you see him on the offensive side of the ball. He makes the big catch. He makes the big play. In the FCC game for us, we dropped him into the backfield. He ran the ball for us. He did a little bit of everything offensively. He was also an outstanding defensive end and did a great job for us on that side of the ball. Like I said, I want to talk about Kevin a little bit more later, but the one thing I think that you appreciate in a player as a coach, at the beginning of the game, Kevin kicked off for us this year, and at the beginning of the game, I sent him out and said, "Kick deep." I didn't see him again until the game was over. He was on our kickoff team. He was on our defense. He was on the punt return. He was on the offense. He was on the punt. He was on the extra point. He was on the kickoff return. He never came off the field. Those kind of people you find very difficult to replace. The last player that I want to bring up then from the front 5 is Benny Pearson. Benny's another one of those seniors who is just, like all these seniors, it'll be difficult next year to realize they're not on the field. He just seems like he's been around for a long, long time. And he's one of those guys that we really saw a gleam of light in as a sophomore. We thought the potential was there for him to turn into a very good defensive tackle. Slowly but surely it happened. He had an outstanding season last year, another very solid season this year. He plays the trap and that doesn't mean a lot to some of you, but it means a lot to me. He plays the trap about as well as any defensive tackle I've ever seen do it. He is a captain for our team this year. He was our 3rd leading tackler with 62 tackles, an outstanding defensive tackle, and we will miss him next year also. These people are all receiving varsity letter awards from our front 5. Next guy who's going to come up is going to award the defensive awards to our defensive backs, our younger defensive backs. I had the pleasure of playing with him in high school. He was not a defensive back. He came on this year and worked extremely hard for us to learn a position. That's Coach Bob Crawford.
I'd like to take a moment at this time and thank everyone who lost my place. That shows you how I get when I get in front of a group of people that let me be a part of the Tipp City system and the Tipp City football program. At this time, I'd like to have the young men come up that will be receiving reserve awards. The first person is Mr. Kenny Brown. I like Kenny a whole lot. I owe him a lot. Like Tim said, my first year here, and first time I met Kenny made me feel right at home. So he's a very versatile young man, played short corner for us, and ran our scout team. Second young man is Darby Worley. Darby's a linebacker, and he came on towards the second half of the year to be our place kicker. Darby's a freshman. He's really looking forward to having the next 3 years developing him as a kicker and as a linebacker and fullback. The next young man, we were worried about at the beginning of the season. We were saying, man, is this kid going to be able to take a lick? Is he going to be able to stay in there? We had by the end of the season, had no problems with him. Whenever we needed a break in the tension, this was a guy who came up with it. I'm talking about Greg Jennings. He always had something to say, kind of broke the ice. Greg's a freshman. He's a reserve quarterback and played free safety for us. Next young man is Eldon Idemiller. If ever I saw a young man that could really take a hit, this young man can take a hit. We were on the scout team, and we were yelling around, we need another back, and I'm expecting to see red shirts in there, jumping in there, and here's Eldon, a freshman, in there taking hits. So he did an excellent, excellent young job. And the last young man is Luke Furlong. And Luke did a real good job for us this year. I always remember the catch on the JV game against Chaminade. Luke, I swear, he turned into water paint in there for a while. He caught the ball, put a couple jukes on, gained about 15 yards. It was fantastic. These are our reserve recipients. I'd like to take a moment also. Our reserve team this year was 6-1. We lost to Chaminade. Other than that, we were undefeated in the conference. These young men, all the reserve young men who played, it's a good job by being undefeated, because this is what the varsity is built on. So next year, we'll be really expecting a lot out of you. Thank you.
The next coach is going to come up is Coach Greg Cheney. Cheney, something like that. Coach Greg Cheney. Yeah. Coach Cheney, again, he's one of those guys, I'm not going to get into his age, but he's been around for a long time, too, and he's kind of a mainstay on our staff. He's a guy that I simply would not make it without him. He's got a million ideas for me. I love shooting his ideas down, but if I didn't have him coming all the time, I'd probably be a very dull coach. And a lot of the things that you see happen on the field are ideas of Coach Cheney. He's the epitome of the word steady. He's always there when you need him.
I have the privilege of coaching the secondary, or the defensive backs, on the football team, and there's quite a group of young men that I've worked with this year, and I'd like to bring those guys up here in just a moment. Secondary, these guys are the athletes of the defense. They're the ones with a great deal of courage also. These guys have the guts during two-a-days when we go out in the afternoon in the heat to stretch in the shade and take the abuse from the other position coaches and the other position players from the rest of the practice field. They've got the guts to do that, and that tells a little something about them. The first Well, let me say something else about this secondary. These guys are smart, too. They like to play coverages. One of the things they probably hate the most is to play a two tight end, full house offense, where we end up in basically two coverages with very little movement, no motion, and very little to do but just read and play run. Give them a team that spreads out, that runs multiple formations, that runs motion, that throws the ball, runs trick plays, has a few outstanding receivers, and these guys are in heaven. They love to make adjustments. They love to move around on the field and play that kind of defense. First guy I'd like to bring up is a second-year letter winner, Dake Van Arsdale. One thing I'd like to say about Dake, Dake is about 129 pounds going on 180 in his heart. He takes a lot of physical punishment on the field. He did a good job providing a lot of leadership in some of our reserve games this year. He does an outstanding job on our scout offense team during the week, running against the defense. One of the situations there is that some of the reserve games are played on Monday, and Tuesday is our main defensive day. So when Dake is trying to get over the bumps and bruises of a Monday game, he's thrown in with the scout offense running against the first defense on Tuesday. So he takes 2 straight days a lot of times of a great deal of physical punishment and never complains, never. And I think a lot of our players have a great deal of respect for him in that regard. Second young man I'd like to bring up is a third-year letter winner. He's a junior, receiving his 3rd varsity award, Chris Hellier. Chris is our free safety. This is his 3rd year at free safety. He this year was what we would call Bingo Bob. He led the secondary with 3 interceptions and really had an outstanding season. Next, I'd like to bring up a senior who's playing his 1st year of football with us, Kurt Lampert. Kurt has not been out for football as he's been here in high school, and decided this year he's going to come out for the team. I think the team and Kurt are both well off for it. I know Kurt gained some experiences through the football season this year, some things that he'll keep with him for the rest of his life, I'm sure. Next is another player who is back with us, I guess I should say. He was out as a freshman and then spent 2 years on another field, lined somewhat similarly, but not quite the same. Sean Hodges. Sean got a great deal of playing time this year as a defensive back. He played wide corner, played some strong safety, played some short corner for us at various times, played where we needed him in the secondary, and really did an outstanding job of adjusting to a number of different positions after having been away from the game for a couple of years. Offensively, he did a fine job at wing back and playing some tailback. He rushed for 195 yards for the season and averaged 5.6 yards a carry on offense. Did a real fine job there. Next, Brian Bissonette. Brian is a 2nd-year letter winner. Brian came along really well this season, especially towards the end of the season. Finished very, very strong at the end of the season. Had 2 interceptions. And really played outstanding defense in the Miami East game and in the West Milton game. The next player I'd like to bring up is a guy who did a great deal of work for our secondary. Didn't play in the secondary, but he certainly gave us a great deal to defend during practice, and that's J.D. Blair. J.D.'s statistics are on the offensive side of the ball. He's an outstanding receiver, very good hands, led the team in receptions and receiving yardage this season. Did a real fine job. J.D., I'm sure a number of his catches stick in your mind. Very, very good hands. Keith Earls. Keith is a second-year player in the secondary, second-year letterman at in the offensive backfield. Keith had an interception this year from his strong safety position. Played very fine defense. Did a good job against those two tight end teams that like to quick pitch, run the sweep, and he came up very well from his strong safety position. Keith also very fine tailback for us this season. Led the team in rushing. Gained 457 yards on 108 carries to average 4.2 yards a carry, and scored 6 touchdowns on offense. Next, Darrell Bowling. Darrell's a 3-year starter in the secondary at short corner. He's one of our captains. Darrell shares a spot in the record book. He has 2 interceptions in a game, which I believe occurred last year, but that ties school record. He also has 9 career interceptions, 2 off the school record. And Darrell is one of those players very well versed, very knowledgeable, I guess I should say, as far as secondary coverages. After having played the coverages that we played for 3 years, making adjustments and doing things on the field, Darrell's one of the leaders there as far as knowing what to do and calling our coverages on the field and calling adjustments to those coverages. Next, Mike Bodendistel. If you'd ask Mike, he would probably tell you that he was one of the best defensive players that we had, just never got the chance. Mike, of course, found himself on the offensive side of the ball. Again, Mike worked against our secondary in practice from the offensive side, along with J.D., throwing the ball and really giving us a good look at passes, better than we saw throughout the season from our opponents. Mike, of course, was our quarterback, and I feel he had a real fine year at quarterback. He's a kid that had a lot of expectations. We had a lot of expectations. I think a lot of people did of Mike, and I don't feel at all that he let us down. I think he had a real fine year. A lot of his contribution to the team was in his leadership on the field and in the huddle on offense. And in that regard, he did a very, very fine job. His offensive statistics will bear that out. So these are the gentlemen that I've had a great deal of pleasure working with for the last few years, seniors. I'll be sorry to see you go. It's been a pleasure working with you and spending the time with you. Underclassmen, we've got next year. So
gives you an opportunity to see an awful lot of our young men and just find out their accomplishments and what our coaching staff thinks of them. There are a couple of other awards and a couple of other people that I need to mention before we get into our special awards. First of all, I want to bring up 2 young men who helped us an awful lot this year. The men behind the scenes, the little guys you saw giving each other high fives on the sideline and doing the little things that we need them to do. First of all, our game night manager is Jeff Judy. Jeff did a real good job for us this year. He takes my wrath on Friday nights when I'm yelling for somebody to get the tee, and sometimes I think the water jug's bigger than him, but he gets the job done. I appreciate his help this year. The other young man that I'd like to call up then is kind of a team favorite, Aaron Jennings. Aaron's been told more stories in 1 year than most people here in a lifetime, and I think he's gained enough stories to tell the rest of his lifetime in 1 year. He was a real plus to us this year, and we enjoyed having him around. He helped out as a manager for us. He was always there from the time two-a-days started at the beginning of the year all the way through, every night of practice and through the end of the season, and we certainly appreciate his help, and it was priceless to us. When I mention those two guys, there is a third person I want to mention, and I'm not going to bring him up and give him an award, but I want to make sure that you realize I didn't forget him. I was just saving him for this time. We have a classic here at school, a guy who is... I don't even want to take a guess on how many hours he spends here and how much benefit he is to the athletic program, and that's Mr. Jim Judy. And stand up, buddy. Jim works countless hours. He does jobs that if we had to do them as a coaching staff, it would be extremely difficult to get done everything that we need to do. The work that he does is just... you can't put a price tag on it. He does an awful lot for us, and we appreciate it. And I certainly appreciate him from another standpoint. He's an old football coach, and he's always there. He's always willing to listen to my troubles. He's always willing to listen to my ideas, and he's always willing to give me ideas that he thinks would be beneficial. And I tell you, it's just like having your own little resource library to go to, and that certainly is a benefit to me as a head coach. The next, from here on out, the next people I'd like to bring up and give recognition to are some of the people on our squad who have received special recognition, either on our team here or throughout the area. And there are some players who have excelled in their positions and excelled in their careers, and they certainly are deserving of everything that they've received. First of all, the first group of people I'd like to bring up are those people who received mention Monday night at the All Southwestern Rivers Conference meeting for being named All-Conference at one level or another. Again, this is a talented group of young men, and I want to give you a little bit of information about them and tell you about them. First of all, receiving honorable mention for us this year in the conference was one young man who worked very hard for us on our offensive and defensive line. He was a sticker for us. I have one of these. He was a sticker for us on both sides of the ball. He's a big hit type of person. He had 84 tackles this year. He was our intimidator. He was our intimidator on the practice field. He was our intimidator on game night. And he certainly is deserving of honorable mention, all SRC, and that's Jeff Mormon. Yeah, I'm going to give them to him now and I'm going to sign them back. Second young man who was honorable mention all conference is Mike Bodendistel. Mike was one of those people when you were sitting in Tipp City every Friday night, you wonder how this guy didn't quite get the nod for first team. There were two outstanding quarterbacks in the conference this year, and he came up a vote short, but we sure do appreciate his accomplishments. He was a very, very big force and a very big reason why we finished 4-2 in the conference. Third young man was honorable mention all conference. This young man I know is somewhat discouraged over the fact that some of the postseason all area teams and all conference teams have not fallen his way, and he hasn't received just that vote that he needs to get him in. But I tell you what, he doesn't need to be discouraged because his statistics speak for themselves. And long after all area teams and all conference teams are gone, I don't think anybody will forget what J.D. Blair did on the offensive side of the ball for us this year. Offensively, as a pass receiver, J.D. had 31 catches for 582 yards. That's an average of 18.8 yards a catch. He had 16 touchdown catches. His longest reception of the year was 71 yards. He had 4 catches on the year that totaled 40-plus yards. He was our big play man. He could do it. In the back of your mind, when you were setting the bleachers, you had to be thinking, when are they going to go deep to J.D.? When are they going to go deep to J.D.? And just as you were thinking that, boom, it happened. And I tell you, the kid's got some incredible hands. He's got some incredible hands. He can catch the ball. And you know what I think is a great asset to him as a wide receiver? He doesn't really like contact. And that's great. That's great, because when J.D. caught the ball, it was hard to catch him. And he was off and running, and he was headed in the right direction. He was headed towards the end zone, and he's an outstanding receiver who we're dearly going to miss. One other thing I want to mention about J.D. We have 33 school records that I'm aware of in the short amount of time that I've been here. J.D. will graduate this year, and behind him he will hold or have tied 8 of those 33 school records. He has the record for most catches in a season, 31, most yards gained receiving in a season, 582, most yards gained receiving in a game, 129, most career touchdowns, 9, most yards gained in a career, 944, most yards punting in a year, 1,524, and most yards punting in a career, 2,716, and I think he's an outstanding ball player. The next 3 young men were all named first team all-conference, and that, of course, is an honor that will never be taken away from them. They, too, excelled at their position, excelled for their team, and excelled in the conference, and would give them special recognition tonight. First of all is Carl Pera. Carl is kind of special in that this year he was returning. He is a 2-time first-team All-Southwestern Rivers Conference player. He was named there last year as a defensive back. As Coach Taylor pointed out earlier, he made the move this year, an unselfish move to the linebacker position. He stepped right in, and I'll tell you, when it came down to time for all conference, there was no question within the minds of the coaches in the conference that he was one of the top 4 linebackers in the conference this year. He's a steady player. As Coach Taylor mentioned, he doesn't always make the big hit, but people realized at the end of the game that he was out there, and they couldn't seem to get around him. Okay? The next young man is Chris Hellier. Chris is in somewhat of an elite group also, in that he was named first-team all-conference this year as a junior. Chris received his 3rd-year varsity letter this year as a junior, and we're very pleased about the fact that he's going to be back next year. Chris now has currently somewhere in the vicinity of like 7 or 8 career interceptions, and he'll definitely threaten Daryl's mark of 9 next year, and also will probably make a run at a guy that wasn't a bad defensive back by the name of Doug Zimmer. Chris just did an outstanding job for us this year on the field defensively, and again, that was recognized around the conference. Next young man who was named first-team all-conference this year, and I know that somewhere in the back of his mind, even though he didn't mention it to me, it was a goal of his. Last year he came very close and was honorable mention, and I know he wanted to earn that award this year, and that's Kevin Mader. Kevin had an outstanding season for us also. I mentioned earlier that he did a great job for us on the defensive side of the ball. He also did a great job for us on the offensive side of the ball. He was named first-team all-conference as a tight end. I think the thing that I continue to hear from coaches around the conference is that they respect his blocking ability as well as his catching ability. I talked to Al Hetrick Monday night from Versailles. He said, I still don't understand. My kid was all over Kevin in the game, and he still came down with the football. And he just seemed to do that for the last 3 years for us, and we certainly appreciate his skills and everything that he's done. These 3 young men were all first-team all-conference. Come down to the point now where we give special awards for the team. We give 6 special awards in football, and we give out the offensive lineman of the year, the offensive back of the year, the defensive lineman of the year, and the defensive back of the year. Something that's called the McDermott Award, which I'll be talking about in a little bit, and then our Red Devil of the Year Award. I don't think I have to tell you, with a team that's got 16 seniors on it, it's extremely difficult to come up with special awards. I wished I could give them all a special award. They've done something special for this program that I'll be talking about in a little bit, but we have to single some of them out, and we've attempted to do that, and I tell you what, you can't deny the fact that these 6 young men had outstanding seasons for us. First special award that I would like to give is the Offensive Lineman of the Year. Offensive Lineman of the Year this year was a young man who was very versatile in the different things that he could do. I mentioned the fact earlier that when he took the field, he never came off the field. He could block, he could catch, he could play defense, he could kick, he could do just about anything we asked for him to do. And when it came that time of the night on Friday night, when it came 7:30, there was just something inside me that I knew this kid would play for me. And he always seemed to do that throughout the course of the season. His statistics read 24 catches, 422 yards, 17.6 yards a catch, 6 touchdowns, 7 career touchdowns. His longest catch was 49 yards. It turned the tables against the Milton Union Bulldogs at a very crucial point in the game. He leaves here holding the career mark of 64 catches in his career. You figure that out, in 3 years he's catching the ball 21, 22 times a season. That's the kind of steadiness that you look for from a kid when he starts out his sophomore year and finishes up his senior year. Our Offensive Lineman of the Year, a guy who could block and catch both, our tight end, Kevin Mater. Nope. It's one of these. Yeah. You bet, bud. I don't want to get too far along, too, because with the fact that it just came out, I almost forgot it, and I want to throw it in now, too. Kevin can take an extra bow. Tuesday, he was recognized by the Associated Press as second team All-Southwestern District tight end. And that's quite an honor. It's a tough team to make, and I'm proud of the fact that he was named to that team. The next award that we would like to give is to our Offensive Back of the Year. Our Offensive Back of the Year this year was a guy who showed some versatility of his own also. In the rushing department, he was our second leading rusher. He had 69 carries for 310 yards. That was a 3.9 yard average on a carry. He had 6 touchdowns rushing. His longest run was 30 yards. Late in the season, when we got in a situation where we felt like we didn't want to risk a turnover, we didn't want to give the ball up, and we needed 3 yards, we went to him. At the same time, when we needed a big play, we went to him. He threw the ball 147 times. He completed 71 of those passes for 48%, 1,254 yards passing on a season. That's an average of 17.7 yards a throw, 125 yards a game. He threw 15 touchdown passes and 147 throws. He only threw 4 interceptions. His longest throw was a touchdown of 71 yards. Our Offensive Back of the Year was Mike Bodendistel. Next awards go to our defensive players. Our Defensive Players of the Year start out with our Defensive Back of the Year. Our Defensive Back of the Year is a young man who just kind of provides stability. I keep talking about these guys that are steady and stable, and you don't know how much they mean to a coach when you've got somebody out there that you can say, don't worry, he's going to be there. And definitely he's a young man who was there. From his free safety position, he was in on 26, no, that's the wrong statistics. From his free safety position, he was in on 59 tackles. He had 3 interceptions. He is a young man who now has started for us 3 years in our defensive secondary. He is a guy who seems to get better and better and better, and that seems almost impossible year in and year out. He always knows where he's supposed to be, and we're glad that he's there. He'll come up and make the big hit on you. He'll make you hurt physically. He'll get back and knock the ball down and make you hurt mentally. He's an all-around defensive back. Our Defensive Back of the Year is Chris Hellier. Our Defensive Lineman of the Year is a young man that you've heard talked about a couple of times already tonight. you don't want to beleaguer the point, but he's just there. He's the intimidator, Jeff Mormon. That leaves 2 awards to give tonight. Our first award that I want to give out is the McDermott Award. The McDermott Award is an award which is given to a young man who has to, by all means, be a person who is a special person, who has a great deal of versatility, who fills an awful lot of different walks in life. The McDermott Award is given out to a young man who has leadership ability. Along with the leadership ability, they have academic ability. Along with the academic ability, they have great ethics and morals and a great civic standing. Along with that, they're a person who has to have an awful lot of athletic ability. And I sometimes question whether some people realize that the way the guidelines are drawn up, the McDermott Award is based 50% on athletic ability and their job that they do on a playing field. We feel like the McDermott Award goes this year to a young man who we really feel is a special young man. He's been with us all 4 years. He's been a competitor. He's done the job in the classroom. He's done a job in the field of leadership. He's done a job on the field. That's certainly been shown by the Southwestern Rivers Coaches Conference coaches. Our McDermott Award this year goes to Carl Pera. And the last award that we're going to give tonight is the Red Devil Award. There are some people that I just hate to come back next August and not see their face. And he is certainly one of those young men. He seems like he's always been around. In the 2 years that I've been the head coach now, I've had an opportunity to get to know this guy. And you got to get to know him, and you got to talk to him, and you got to pull him out of his shell, and you really got to push him. And then when you get to know him, you just realize that he's a class person. He walks with class. He talks with class. Everything about him is classy. He's an outstanding athlete. His name is etched in the record books of Tipp City, and I dare to say it'll be a while before anybody erases it. He leaves here holding 9 of the 33 school records, and he's an outstanding athlete, Mike Bodendistel. I'll bring him down to earth tomorrow. Get on him a little bit. There you have the majority of our awards, or all of our awards that we're going to give out tonight. It's a tough season to see go. We graduate 16 seniors off of this team. We have so many of those young men who will be leaving us and not be back next year, and it'll be discouraging to see them go. And yet I have a lot of confidence in them. I know that they're going to go on to bigger and better things, and there's just something about the group that makes you know they will excel. They will do well, and they will have, they, as Coach Taylor said, will really be able to gain from their experience here, and I think will be successful because of it. You can't say enough about the seniors. You know, I sat down last night, and I sat down again this afternoon, and I tried over and over and over to come up with some kind of a summary statement to make about the 4 years that those young men have been with us, and it's impossible. There's no way that you can summarize, and I know the length of the banquet has continued to go on, there's no way that I could summarize what these guys have done in 4 years. You can break down their game by game and look at it, and there's an awful lot there to look at. You can break down practice by practice and classroom by classroom, and there's an awful lot there to look at. And yet you can't put it all in a nutshell. It's a team that's been through a lot of ups and downs. They came in here as freshmen with high hopes. They suffered through a couple of tough years. They paid the dues. They went out there, a lot of them, and got beat up on for 2 years every night in practice. They went out there, a lot of them as sophomores, and played at the varsity level and took their lumps. And in the end, it paid off for them. And you know, there's been a lot of ups and downs, and they go back a long way. You think about the Piqua game of 1985 and the fact that we were hoping for something new. Something's got to happen this year. And in overtime, it happened. You look at the Covington game of that year and the fact that we were hoping for something big then, and we got our bell rung. We got our bell rung. One of the downs. You look at Versailles and the way they bounced back and beat Versailles in 85, and then the disappointment of homecoming loss against Miami East. And then you come on into this year with all those high hopes and all those high expectations, and boom, you start out the season with 2 losses. And I've told these guys so many times, and I tell you tonight, the one thing I can rely on, they didn't quit. They just kept coming back. And they did that week in and week out. They bounced back with a big win against a team from Northeastern who left here and didn't know what hit them. They came back. They gave it to Covington, and now Covington's standing up and saying, we got our bell rung. And every week they continue to come back, and I don't know of a better way we could have finished it than the fashion we finished it over at Milton a couple of weeks ago. That was outstanding, and if you were in the stands and you couldn't get excited about that game, then you're halfway dead, because that was an exciting game. That was an exciting game. We're down 21-12, and the characteristic of the team came through. And it was a very big win for us and a very big win for the program. Individually, just, I can talk about Mike and J.D. and Kevin and some of their statistics, and they go on and on and on. And I look at a kid like Brian Bissonette, and I think about the CJ game when he caught a kid from behind and brought him down with a one-hand tackle that he had no business making. It was just an outstanding tackle. I think about a kid like Sean Hodges and how glad I am that he decided to come back out and be a part of this team and be a part of something that I know an awful lot of his friends are a part of. There's just an awful lot of individual stories and an awful lot of game stories that you could tell, and it makes it very difficult to sum it up. It was an exciting season, and I keep telling the kids throughout the course of the year that you really can't measure things in wins and losses, and this is a group that proves that. They played 10 games, won 5 of them, lost 5 of them by a total of 22 points. The most they lost by was 9 points. They kept coming back, they kept proving their character, and it paid off for them in a year. Eventually, they were 4-2, tied for second in the conference, and did very well in that respect. I have a lot of hope for them, a lot of anticipation for the young guys. Older guys, stay after it. You got to stay after it. A friend of mine who teaches here in the building always says, you got it between the ears, you just got to make sure you got it in the spine. Just make sure that you keep your courage, make sure that you give them everything you got, and you'll be fine. Younger guys, we have high expectations for you. You get out there and get yourself involved in another sport. If you're not out there involved in another sport, you get in our weight room. We have high hopes for you next year. And I think I'm going to wrap it up there in terms of this year. And the last thing that I would like to do then, the last 3 people that I would like to recognize, Wednesday night our underclassmen met, and I think this is a fitting way to finish each banquet. Next year, our team captains, voted on by the players, are going to be, and if they'll stand up where they're sitting, please, first of all, Kenny Brown. Secondly, Dake Van Orsdale. And third is Chris Hellier. And with that, we approach football 87.
Latest and In Your Eyes.